Hey, what's up guys? JB here. So it's time once again for another installment of my Versus series. And in a first, we're going to be looking at two different elements today. And similar to my last Versus battle, it is going to be a standoff between two big-time tanks. And two highly anticipated units at that. On the left side, we're going to have Dialdo repping the Earth elements. On the right side, we have Hot Topic Catone, none other than Raph for the Dark elements. And the timing really couldn't be any better at this point, as we're going to be set to see both of these units here in Global sometime over the next 4 to 5 weeks, starting with Dialdo as soon as next week. Now, I have heard the questions firsthand, and I know that there are players out there thinking to themselves, both of these units look great, but I can only afford to pull one. JB, which one do I pull? Well, I don't know if I'm going to have a good answer, but I'll certainly do my best, because that is exactly what we're going to try to work through here today, and we're going to do it Versus style, combing through their kits with more than 40 points of comparison across all facets of the game. So I am super stoked for this one. Let's do it, guys. Let's kick off round one.
Round one. Fight.
And of course, we're going to have to start things off today with the tanking rounds, where we'll go through the various tanking related attributes and we're going to see who comes out on top. And the first category here today is going to be none other than base HP. Of course, raw hit points are going to be one of the most valuable stats for your tank in the game, and as you can see here, it's incredibly close in this category. Both tanks are going to be right around that 4,500 base HP mark. That has them second and third respectively in the entirety of the War of the Visions cast, behind only Engelbert. Of course, Raph here does have a small edge of about 60 hit points, though both of them do have HP passives that they will end up using in most builds, so really no meaningful difference here. I'm going to call this one even. Now the second category here is going to be defense and spirit totals. Definitely not the end-all be-all that they once were in terms of mitigation. At the end of the day though, every little bit helps, when you're trying to mitigate that damage, so they're certainly still very nice to have. Now both units are actually going to be doing very well here in this category, but Dialdo is going to pick up the first point of the match here. His combination of both high base defense and spirit with passives is just a little bit more valuable than what I think Raph brings, which is essentially just very high base defense. Of course, Raph can mix in, potentially double defensive passives if you want to, and if you really wanted to go crazy. The 29 though, I think is what you can expect in a realistic build. But Dialdo does get the point here based on the flexibility and well-roundedness. Now next one up, we're going to be talking about tanking counter abilities. Of course, since the third anniversary, we've been seeing some very strong counters coming into the game, and these two units here are no exception. They both have some strong counters that specifically help them in the tanking department, and once again, I'm going to be giving Dialdo the edge on this one. He has 3 nice options in his kit for his base counter, whether it's up against physical, magical, or mixed damage, but then on top of that, he has a secondary buffable counter that he can put on to really shut down physical units out there with a massive 30% damage cut. So while I do love Raph's counter specifically going up against slash damage dealers, it is Dialdo that is getting the nod here once again, purely on that versatility angle, and definitely kind of an early theme here for that unit. Now what about their innate damage resistances? Again, they're not going to be too far off from each other in this category. Both have a stacked resist line. Dialdo's going to be getting a small edge in the 3 primary damage types of slash, magic, and missile. Then they're both carrying the same weakness against pierce damage, both coming in at a -5, but it is Raph that I'm going to give this category to, as she carries a huge strength against the strike damage type at 25% versus Dialdo's 10%. Again though, this one is very close. We're certainly splitting hairs on this one. Now staying on the resist fronts, the next two are going to be 2 impenetrable resist types of both unit and area resistance. 2 very important stats in today's game. And once again, this is going to be a relative strength for both units, but it is Dialdo that's going to end up taking both of these categories by a small margin. He has that nice combination of 15 and 10 respectively via his mastery and main passives. And to top it off, he can also pick up even more with his active buffs. Now next up, we're going to talk about one of the most important facets for a tank, and that is their hate. Both what they have innately and then what they can generate actively in battle. Now in terms of innate hate, Raph is going to be coming in with the new standard for modern tanks of 10 innate hate. For active hate generation, technically they both do have access to skills which can increase their hate value. I am going to give the edge to Dialdo in this category though, since his active hate generation does come in on one of his main buffs that he'll be using in each and every battle, whereas Raph has access to Taunting Spell from her Spellblade sub-job, but unfortunately it is not a skill that the AI is going to be looking to prioritize over some of the more powerful AoE attacks that she has in her main kit. Now, last but not least, we're going to have a new category here for tanking, and that is the ability to weaken debuffs. And this is not to be confused with debuff resistance, as we initially thought that these units had access to early on, but this is actually a new mechanic for the game that does debut with Dialdo, and it's going to do exactly what it says. If they get hit with an imperil or a break while this debuff weakening effect is active, the power of those debuffs will be significantly reduced. So for example, a 38% imperil would be reduced to just a 19% imperil while these buffs are active. So this is a very strong new tanking ability, and they both get access to the same buff, so this last category is going to end up even. So that is going to do it here for round 1. Dialdo is actually going to take this one 4 points to 2. Honestly, it is super close though, and really these two units are representing probably the best that we've seen when it comes to raw tanking capability.
Round 2. Fight!
All right, guys, we're on to round 2, and this one is all about utility. What effects and unique skills are they bringing to help turn the tide in battle? And first up is going to be a barrier break, perhaps one of the most important utilities to have amongst your team. Do either of them get it? And the sad answer is no. Honestly, I can't think of many tanks out there that do get that capability, and these two are going to be no exception there, so no points here in category 1. Now, the next couple that we're going to look at here are going to be breaks, attack, magic, defense, and spirit, and both of these units do have access to some breaks, but I'm actually going to give both of these categories here to Raph. You know, Dialdo, despite having access to a couple of better singular breaks here among them, they are going to be tied into different subkits, you know, across different skills, and they are also coming in at a very short range for him. So Raph, despite having smaller breaks from a numbers perspective, hers is actually a full break. It's going to break all 4 of those stats at once, and that is coming on a large diamond AoE for her as well, meaning that there's a very good chance that she's going to be breaking multiple units on your team with that, and really amping up, you know, a little bit of her survivability as well as the team's damage there as well. Now, next up, we're going to be looking at a couple of key status dispel in Immortal Spirit and Re-Raise. Now, they both actually do have a little bit of capability here. Dialdo can do this from his Resistance Break skill and his Red Mage sub, while Raph has access to an Immortal Spirit dispel as part of her core kit. So considering that, I'm going to call this one even. Both have nice utility here. Now, the next category up here is going to be an Imperil. Of course, a very nice utility to have in the modern game where we're seeing more and more elemental resistance. Now, Raph is going to get a 25% single target Dark Imperil as her Job 25 ability. Dialdo, on the other hand, unfortunately, he doesn't have access to any Imperils in his kit, so easy win for Raph here in this category. Now, what about a general dispel? Of course, there's so many nice buffs that have come into the game over the past 1 to 2 years, and of course, haste is absolutely everywhere in today's game. You know, some of the recent TMRs, you know, making it even more common. Now, of course, we know at this point that general dispel ability can shut all of those things down, and along with the barrier break is essential utility to have in today's PvP game. Well, Dialdo does have a skill that can cover you there, and it is area of effect as well. Raph, on the other hand, she doesn't have any general dispel, so this one is going to Dialdo. All right, guys, last 3 here for the utility rounds. AP Break. This one can be a very effective tool for shutting down some physical units. Dialdo has one, so he's going to take that. He's also going to take the counter block category here as well. One of his core abilities can completely shut down and seal the counters for your targets. Now, the last one on the list here is another important status dispel, and that is going to be for either Protect or Shell. Now, Dialdo doesn't bring any utility when it comes to either of those. Raph, on the other hand, she has the ability to dispel Shell, and that's actually tied into the same skill as that Immortal Spirit dispel that we talked about, so very nice skill there, and Raph is going to take this category. All right, guys, that is going to do it here for round 2, and if we tally all the points up here, Raph is going to take this round 4 points to 3. So 2 rounds in, and the 2 tanks here are neck and neck.
Round 3.
Moving on now to round 3, and this is the support rounds. And we're going to be looking at how these units can help themselves or their allies in the fight in terms of buffs or heals or etc. And the first one up here is going to be healing capability. Now, they actually both do have a healing spell available to them in their kits. Whether you can actually get any use out of it in auto PvP is a different question. Since their healing abilities are area of effect, you're definitely not going to want your tank running over to a teammate trying to heal them up. Now, I am actually going to give a small nod in this category to Dialdo. I don't think that his Cura is quite as good as Raph's short-range area of effect heal. On the other hand, he does have counter cure available to him. He does have a regen that he can put on himself as well from his LB, which I think you'll be seeing those 2 things a lot more often in active battles. So this one goes to Dialdo. Now, the next one up here also going to be on the healing front, and that's going to be an auto heal back ability. This is something that we've been seeing come into the game quite a bit over the last 6 to 9 months. Now, Dialdo, unfortunately, he doesn't have this capability innately, so this one is going to go to Raph. One of her main buffs does provide her a 40% auto heal back when she goes below 50% health or lower. Now, the next one up is going to be an HP absorb attack. Of course, those can end up being super clutch in the mid fights, maybe get you enough health back that you can survive another hit. And both Dialdo and Raph do have one. Dialdo's is going to be a very short range single attack. Raph, on the other hand, she has actually got a much better skill here with her Law of Geoabsorption from her Scholar's sub-job. It's a very good skill with actually very nice healing potential being AoE. But, the lack of cast time reduction and AI priority, I think, actually is going to make it a lot harder for her to line up. So I think considering those two caveats, this one's going to be even for me. Now, another important one here is going to be access to a barrier. Although there are a lot of barrier breaks out there, not all units have them, and they may not have the range to use them against you right away. So in this category, Dialdo has access to a 3-hit magic barrier that he gets from his Kododama sub-job. Raph, on the other hand, she has a 3-hit all-damage barrier that's going to be coming in on one of her main buffs. So that one is much more usable and much more flexible as well. I'm going to give this one to Raph. Now, what about defense and spirit buffs? Something that we typically see on many tanks out there. Well, this one, they both have access to a defense buff. Dialdo's is going to be coming packaged with one of his core abilities. Meanwhile, Raph is going to have Law of Preservation coming in from her Scholar's sub-job. It's actually a very good skill that has some debuff resistances in there as well. I think the issue here is that the majority of time, you're only going to have, time to maybe get off 2 buffs in battle. And her 2 main job buffs are going to be taking precedence, in almost all situations. They're just too good and have too much other utility packed into them. So in this case, I am going to give the edge to Dialdo. He's going to have that additional defense online in most situations. Now, this next one is kind of along that same line. Do they have access to any resistance buffs that they can put on? Now, Dialdo, he actually has a couple of options here. He has an area resistance buff that can come in from his Kododama sub-job, and then he has an earth and lightning resist buff that he can get from his main job sub. So I think both of those are pretty decent, but they are just kind of spread across a couple of different sub-jobs and maybe a bit more challenging to use. Raph, on the other hand, she has a light and dark resistance buff. She also has a conditional triggered area resist buff that she gets when her re-raise goes off. Now, technically, she does have a magic resist buff as well. The problem is that one is a party buff, so I don't think that you're going to be wanting to use that in most situations in auto play. Either way, though, I'm going to be giving the edge here to Raph simply because she has some of those resistances as part of her core skill set, whereas Dialdo's are going to be a bit more niche play. Now, the next category here is going to be a more recent mechanic, and that is going to be elemental chain protection. Raph doesn't get access to it. Dialdo, on the other hand, does. He has a buffable 80% elemental chain protection that is going to be coming in from his main job. And that's going to be very valuable to have against those mono element teams out there that are trying to take him down quickly with those chaining attacks. So Dialdo is going to be taking this category. Now, last one here for round 3, Protect and Shell. Do they have access to it? Once again, Raph is going to be coming up empty here in this category. Dialdo, though, he does get Shell, and that's going to be coming in on one of his main buffs. And that's once again giving him very nice omni-tanking potential where he's mixing both physical and magical tanking tools together. I think this one is going down to the wire, guys. Dialdo takes this round 4-3.
Round 4. Fight!
All right, we're on to round 4, and this one is the damage rounds. And here we're going to be looking at their pure damage-related attributes and see how they're going to stack up against one another. Now, both of these tanks' damage does scale off of magic, so we're going to start the round off with that. Raph actually does have a small edge there at 410 to 404 for their innate total. If that were all, I think that's pretty negligible, too close to call. I'm going to give this one to Raph, though, simply because her base value is significantly higher at 340 compared to 286 for Dialdo. Now, next up here, we're going to be looking at the number of damage types they have available to them. Raph is going to take this one once again. She has magic in the main job, she has strike in her scholar job, and then she has slashing from Spellblade. Dialdo, on the other hand, he has piercing and magic attacks. Now, what about their accuracy? Believe it or not, their base hit rates do come in identical at 152%. Raph, though, she does have access to an accuracy-based passive as part of her Scholar sub-job, which will put her up to 172 base hit rate if you were to use it. Now, whether you can actually afford to use that passive in a realistic build, I think is another argument, but I'll definitely give the slight nod to Raph here, just for the flexibility that she has there. Now, the next 3 here are all going to be going Dialdo's way. First one's going to be that that magic damage increase modifier. This is a relatively new mechanic for the game where you get that flat damage increase. Dialdo can get up to 20% increased damage via his mastery and a passive, and definitely is going to help make up for that lower end magic total there that we looked at. Now the next one is going to be maximum modifier. Dialdo is going to take a slight edge in this one, coming in with a 210% mod on one of his skills. And then finally, any innate penetration values that they have. In the past, most tanks really haven't got much to speak of there. Raph is going to continue that story. No magic or spirit penetration coming in for her. Dialdo, on the other hand, he does get a little bit here. He's going to start off with 10 spirit penetration from his mastery. Now, next category up is going to be starting AP value. So actually, one bonus for both of these units is that since they are magic scaled with their damage, they're both going to be starting out with a bank of AP. It is Raph that's going to take this category though. She's going to be starting off with a whopping 75% of her starting AP versus 50% for Dialdo. Now, what about the range of these units? Raph is going to actually be taking the edge on this one as well. She can get up to 5 range across several skills in her kit, including some large area of effect diamonds that are going to be pretty flexible for her to target the enemy, whereas Dialdo is going to be topping out at just a range of 4. I will say though that from a tanking perspective, having access to less range can actually be a good thing in auto play, where sometimes having that additional range can get you baited into some attacks before you're actually able to get all of your buffs online. Of course, you can disable certain attacks if you wanted to on Raph, but at that point it is a pretty big trade-off because those skills actually are some of the key utility that she brings to the fight. So I think in light of that, I'm going to actually end up calling this one even. All right, we're on to the final category for the round here, and that is going to be guaranteed hit access. Of course, tanks aren't really known for their high accuracy, and generally you're not even going to build them up that way anyway because you're going to be more focused on the mitigation that they have in battle. So a 100% hit ability traditionally has been very nice to have on a tank unit. In this case, both Raph and Dialdo do have access to one. Raph has their job 25 ability, Dialdo from his Kodadama sub-job, so this one I'm going to call even as well. But looking at the totals here, once again, Raph is going to take this damage round 4-3.
Fight!
This is a tight one, guys. We are neck and neck through 4 rounds. This is going to be the final deciding round, and this is X Factors. And this is the round we look at attributes that maybe don't necessarily fit into some of the other categories, and maybe a few things that might be easier to overlook, but when you look at them and add them all up at the end of the day, they do represent a nice value. So first up, that's going to be access to chaining abilities. And this one actually is going to end up even. They both have access to 2-hit chaining attacks. Now the next one up is going to be a pretty important stat for a tank, and that is agility. Of course, having higher agility helps you not get lapped in battle and take additional chaining damage. And this one is actually a little bit of a weakness for Raph. Just 53 base agility and 61 innate, definitely on the lower side of both of those. Now she does have access to a passive, which kind of gets her up to more of an average level of 67, which, I think you're really going to be forced to use to kind of keep her speed competitive. So certainly it's nice that she has access to it, but I think from a build perspective, it's definitely limiting for her. Now Dialdo, on the other hand, he's coming in higher in his base value at 57, and he does have 66 innate agility that he's getting. So in a completed build with agility cards and what have you, Dialdo is going to be able to match or even exceed what Raph gets without having to invest a passive to do it. So because of that, this category is going to Dialdo. Now what about their innate crit evasion? I think typically this is one of the more overlooked stats in the game, but at times can be very impactful, depending on some of the units you're going up against, especially on your tank, who is going to be taking the brunt of those hits. Now this one is definitely going to be a strength area for Raph. She actually gets a bonus from her mastery, getting up to her 59 innate crit avoidance value, one of the better starting values in the game. Now these next 2 categories, they're going to be a little bit different, more theoretical, from a team building approach. And we're going to start it off with weapon types, actually very important for the current era of the game as we slowly transition to more rainbow team building with those job-based vision cards. So we're going to be looking at Spear versus Mace. And both of these units do have that unique position that they're essentially enabling those weapon groups for kind of new possibilities, since they are going to be that new frontline tank for the groups. As I've looked at it, this one is super tough to call. Both weapon groups do have very nice synergy with the Fist group. They both have a very nice selection of cards and a good number of cards. I'm going to give this one to Dialdo and the Spear group though, because I think when you actually look at the selection of units, even up through JP's timeline, it's just a little bit stronger overall, in terms of what Mace has today. Now, the next one here is going to be for elements, and in this one, I'm actually going to flip the other way. I'm going to go for Raph and the dark element. Of course, both of these elements, earth and dark, are very strong. Bradley, he's one of the best units in the game, of course. I think top to bottom, though, the overall combinations and number of strong units and vision cards that dark has access to is just a little bit stronger than what earth can field today. Of course, that can all be thrown on its head. Melnia was literally just announced over in JP, but at this point, we don't know anything about her yet, or if she's really going to be as broken as some of the other recent units. Certainly something to keep an eye on, though, over the coming weeks. Now, the next one here is a super easy one to overlook, and that's going to be what their basic attack does. How is that damage scaled? Is it physical or magical? Well, in this case, sadly, they are both physical scaled, so if these units run out of AP or they get hit with a status effect, you're not going to be able to count on any sort of meaningful damage coming from either of them, so this one's going to be even. So next category here is going to be armor type. Both units in this case are going to be cloth based, so they're going to have access to the same equipment. Now, just because we are going down to the wire here, and this is a super close battle, I'm going to start splitting some hairs here. Since Raph is a female, she's going to have access to some accessories that Dialdo can't wear. Off the top of my head, I can think of Velene's selection quest item, which is very nice. And there are a couple of high agility TMRs as well, Dark Phoenix probably being the most notable. So I'm going to give the slight nod in this category to Raph. Now, the next one up here is going to be Vision Card. Generally, this is going to be something that's even more important for us here on Global, where Gumi does hand out those limited bestowed abilities on their Vision Cards. Now, both of these units do have a Vision Card that will come the week after the release, and both of those cards do include very nice tanking espers. And the cards themselves are also very good. But Great Demon, which does come along with Raph, it had a very sizable impact on the meta over in JP, lets you build a very strong dark team around it. And seeing as it's not a 90 cost card like Dark Golem is, it's going to be much easier to obtain as well. So in light of that, I'm going to give this category to Raph. Now, my last category of the battle is going to be about mobility. That's something that can be very impactful on a tank, can help them navigate the map better, can maybe get them some additional separation from their team and help them stay out of area of effect damage. Now, both units here today, they do have some added mobility that they can pull in from their passives. Dialdo can get some additional movement and get up to a 4-1 move, while Raph, on the other hand, she can get an added jump from her passives, getting her up to a 3-2 movement. So this one is super tough to call. I'm going to give it to Dialdo, though, today for two reasons. First is that he can get even more mobility from his Kodadama subjob from an active ability. Of course, not something that will be all that relevant in autoplay, but certainly nice to have from a manual perspective. The second is going to be the existence of the Tourmaline Ring, which, if you do wear it on Dialdo, he's going to be able to get up to a 4-2 native mobility, and that's not something that Raph is going to be able to match. So adding it all up here, guys, this round is going to Raph. She's going to take X Factors 4-3. So that is it for today. 5 rounds in the book. I'm going to be real, guys. This one was about as close as it gets for these versus battles. It was back and forth. It was neck and neck. But tallying it all up here today, Raph is going to take it down 3 rounds to 2. And she is going to be crowned the winner of today's battle. I do hope, though, that it came across clearly that, both of these units are incredibly strong tanks and likely the best that we've seen come into the game to date. So kind of going back and thinking about that original question that we started off with the video, which one should you pull if you can only pull one? Well, I think that the answer to that may be unique for everyone's account. What other units and vision cards do you have access to, not only within their element, but also within their job groups to be able to put together the most optimal teams around them? So I think maybe taking a closer look at it from that angle may be able to get you the answer that you need. If you're an Earth player, should you become a Dark main, just because Raph won today's battle? I'm not so sure about that. I think that both of these units are going to be stalwarts in the game for some time to come, and to be honest, I really don't think that you could go wrong with either one of them. So there we have it, 2 incredible units, 2 incredible tanks, and that is going to be my battle today of Dialdo versus Raph. If you enjoyed the video today, hit that like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And that's really all that I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.